I'm going to sing this one most beautiful song, Christ is Risen. It's one of the most beautiful songs of the oratorio, and I'll just try to do it justice. And Christ is risen this Easter morn, thus our lives to joy are born. He from death is ever free, in his life and so are we. Gone all our darkness, banished forever, in our souls thy light we see. Gone our delusions, clear now our vision, in thy joy we live ever free. Christ is risen this Easter morn, thus our lives to joy are born. He from death is ever free, in his life and so are we. Gone all our darkness, banished forever, in our souls thy light we see. Gone our delusions, clear now our vision, in thy joy we live ever free.
It was on a Friday that Jesus was put to death. Mary Magdalene was one of the few of his disciples who remained by his side the whole time that he was dying. Later that same day, they put his body into a tomb temporarily, in waiting to be prepared for his burial. Normally, they would have buried his body first thing the following morning, on Saturday. But Saturday they were not allowed to do so because it is the weekly day for rest and prayer. And so it was Sunday morning that the Bible tells us what happened on Sunday morning. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. The tomb was empty, and the strips of linen that had wrapped the body were lying there. Mary turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out, "Master." Jesus said, "Do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." On that same evening, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the temple priests, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Personally, when I started seeking spiritually, I looked exclusively to yoga, to meditation, to the masters and eternal philosophy of the East. And all I knew of Christ was the way that he was presented by most of the churches, with a lot of do's and don'ts, and with the narrow dogma saying that Jesus is the only way. And I rejected I had rejected all of that long before. It took Yoganandaji, a guru from India, and his disciple, Kriyanandaji, to show me the inner teachings of Christ, the mystical teachings that were not presented or even recognized by modern churches. Yoganandaji and Swamiji communed with Christ in meditation. And in their book, Revelations of Christ, they give deep inner meaning to the sayings of Jesus, sayings that I had heard many times but didn't hold much meaning or relevance to me. Even the sayings that seemed to be the most sectarian, like God's only begotten Son, or no one comes unto the Father except by me, or I am the way, the truth, and the light. In these phrases, Jesus is not talking about Jesus, the man. He's talking about the universal Christ consciousness that he had attained, and that is the birthright, the divine birthright that all of us can and must attain. When Jesus died and was resurrected into his physical body again, and when he visits his disciples, he said, "Peace be with you." And he demonstrated that peace that he came to bring wasn't one of passive acceptance. It was a victory, and it comes only when we put out the effort to overcome all of our tests. And just as Jesus did on the cross, responding to hatred with love and compassion, when he said, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." I remember when I was in high school, I read a very moving short play. And it was about a woman in Ireland. And her family consisted all of men, her husband and 7 sons. And they were all fishermen. And over the years, they would go out to sea, and one by one, they were drowned, until she was left with only 1 son. And the time came for that son also to go out to sea, and she tried desperately to stop him. And he said, "But I'm a fisherman. It's what I must do. It's my job." And so he goes out to sea. He is drowned. When his body is brought back, his mother has a surprising response. She feels this sense of release, of great release. And she says, "Now I know peace. I've lost everything. There is nothing I can have anymore. So there is nothing to cling to. So I truly have peace." Everything she thought she had valued was taken away from her. And yet something remained. She had developed inner peace. And she was victorious. She had put out the effort to overcome all tests. And in our own way, this is a moment now where our normal habit patterns have been taken away from us. And can we respond with inner peace. Swamiji wrote, Christ's crucifixion and resurrection together dramatize the two essential conditions for knowing God: willingness to face, for His sake, any test that comes, and the faith to accept the test with love and courage, firm in the knowledge that all things pass, whereas God's love is ours forever. All things pass, but God's love is always ours. And resurrection is also for us. Yoganandaji said that resurrection signifies any beneficial or uplifting change. In this sense, resurrection can be experienced repeatedly throughout life. It depends how we respond to difficulty. When tests come, do we close in on ourselves in a selfish way, or do we respond with love and forgiveness? Krishna says, Arjuna, know this for certain, my devotee is never lost. And we're Krishna's devotee, not because we say we are, not because we've joined Ananda Sangha. We're Krishna's devotee when we act like Krishna's devotee, when even in difficulty we can trust in God, we can feel inner peace. When we can say in Swamiji's song, through all trials I sing thy name, joy in thee is life's sole aim. Thank you.
It's really wonderful to be able to have holidays or special reasons to honor and celebrate the great masters that come into the world. And they come in with, Christ came in particular with a very spectacular purpose. And reading about his life, all aspects of his life, his birth, his teachings, his gathering of disciples, his Lord's Prayer, his Beatitudes, all of his teachings, his healing. And then, of course, at Easter time, we focus on just the last few days of his life. And I also am going to just focus on the last day of his life, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Actually, I think it was on Thursday, so it might have been the second to the last day of his life. And he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. We were there recently in Israel, and they had there's a rock there that they say this is the rock where Jesus was praying. And he prayed, Lord, let this cup pass from me. And Master explains that it wasn't because he wanted to be saved from this karma that was about to happen, this drama of humanity that was about to take place. He knew why he had been born, and he knew as a manifestation of God what his mission was and what he needed to do. But all of a sudden he saw that how many people were going to suffer, how many people were going to incur much karma for putting him to death. And he said, let this cup pass from me, if it is your will. And even he had said just shortly before that time, O Jerusalem, how you kill your prophets and stone those that are sent to you. And how I would have, like a mother hen, gathered you all together, but you would not. And so, it reminds me of another song of Swami's in the oratorio, is, would that I might reveal thy greatness, Christ is saying, let me just reveal your greatness. Nevertheless, your will be done. And he said that the people of Jerusalem were just lost in forests of pride. So this was already set in motion. Jesus accepted completely God's will in that situation. And he said, thy will be done. Nevertheless, thy will be done. And he stepped into his role and what he needed to do. When the Roman soldiers came, he just stepped right into it. And Master says, as he stepped forward, actually says in the Bible, as he stepped forward, the guards were just thrown back. His aura, his strength, his power was so strong that just, I'm Jesus, here I am. And the soldiers fell over. And then he was tried and he was crucified. And Yogananda talks about Christ on the cross and said he did not suffer. Because what suffers? Christ's consciousness was one with the infinite. Christ did not have an ego, and it's the ego that suffers. Even though Christ had embraced his humanity. And Master even says, if he wanted to, Christ could have just gone into samadhi and left his body like that. He didn't even have to go through the ordeal of the crucifixion. If he knew the game was up, the story was over, and he was about to get crucified, he could have just sat down and left his body. But he needed to walk through this great trial and show his disciples and show all of us, what do we do when the most severe trial we are facing? With love, with forgiveness, with even-mindedness. We walk through that trial and say, I will just do what you ask of me, Lord. And although Keshava already read this sentence, I want to read what Master said about this sentence, about what Christ said. An unseen monument of the mightiest miracle of love was established in every heart when the magic of thy voice uttered, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Christ was showing us the mightiest miracle of love was established in every heart. And Swami says in the Festival of Light, greater can no love be than this, from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God, willingly to embrace limitation, pain, and death for the salvation of mankind. Such ever has been the sacrifice of the great masters for the world. And why do the masters come? The masters come to show us how to live. Christ's life was his teaching. He was showing his disciples, this is what you're going to have to also do. Because if you're on a serious spiritual path, if you want to feel God's living presence with you, as I do, and as we all do, you're going to have to do battle with the ego. Krishna says, we need to kill the ego. It's a matter of life and death. And how are we going to kill the ego? We have to go through trials. We have to go through suffering. And as we become more and more dedicated spiritual seekers and our consciousness expands more and more, what else can Divine Mother do but give us stronger and stronger trials? And so with every last self-definition of this is who I am, this is who I own, this is what makes me feel secure, this is what makes me happy, if anything stands in between you and God, God eventually will take all that away. After Jesus was crucified, the disciples all gathered in secret, hiding from the Romans and from the priests of the temple. And yet they gathered in support of one another, of love of one another, in courage that they afforded each other, and in faith that Jesus had a plan, that he knew that this was coming, that for some reason or another this had been set in motion, and they were just waiting to see what would be revealed from God for them. What is our next step? And they had fear, they had doubt, they had uncertainty, but they clung together. And there suddenly he was in the midst of them. My peace I give unto you. And so through all that uncertainty and doubt, and through all the darkness, and through all the pain that had happened with them seeing their Lord, their Master, being killed on a cross, it was not as it seemed on the surface. There was nothing greater than the power of God's light. So through all this darkness, God's light was always there, not always apparent, but then shows victorious in the end. And then Jesus was amongst them and said, "Go feed my sheep. Spread the good news of my resurrection. Spread the good news of eternal life, of the victory of light over darkness. Go tell everybody about it. Now this is what you must do. You know, you have been given much. Now much is required of you." He said, "You call me master, but I call you friend." And what does a friend do? A friend picks up the interests and the projects and the mission of their equal, of their friend. And that's what Christ was saying. Now this is your path to walk. And those disciples picked up that responsibility. They went out into the world and they did follow in Jesus' footsteps, and they did become great saints, and they changed the course of history. So they were very victorious. And now us, during this time, we have come together in this satsang. Our hearts are united in God, in our line of gurus, in Christ's love. We come to support each other, to say, be courageous, hang in there, be of good cheer. And when we come together like this, we just bring so much more light to each other. We can't just be off on our own. We need to be together. I spoke to many of you in the last couple of weeks, and I'm just so grateful and joyful to see how even-minded you are being throughout this ordeal, because you're on a spiritual path. So Master said that Babaji and Christ are always in communion. They're in constant communion. And together they are working out the redemption and the salvation for this age. So this virus, do we think they know what's going on? Do we think they know what they're doing? They are asking us, follow me. Follow in my footsteps. Follow my teachings. Everything that we've told you to do, come together, be courageous, share love, serve others, be self-sacrificing, be forgiving. All the things that made them who they are, they're saying, now it is your turn. When Master left his body, when Yoganandaji left his body, he passed the baton on to Swami Kriyananda and other direct disciples. And then when Swami left his body in 2013, he also did the same to all of us. He passed that baton on. Walk in my footsteps. Love everyone. Serve everyone. Share the teachings that will bring us true happiness. Because we are, all of us that we've been talking to, we are finding happiness. We are finding peace in what are otherwise very difficult times. But it's working for us. The teachings work, as they said they would. So let's all rejoice. Let's walk in their footsteps. Let's be even-minded and cheerful and fight the battle that Krishna has set up for us and that Christ said, feed my sheep. Walk where I lead. And don't worry about what anybody else is doing. But he said, what is that to thee? Follow thou me. And the last words of this song again are, gone all our darkness, vanished forever. In our souls, thy light, Christ's light we see. Gone our delusions, clear now our vision. In thy joy we live ever free. Things are not as they seem on the surface. Something much bigger is going on. And through it all, God's power, God's light is with us and will surely emerge victorious. God bless you.